Welcome back to the Hitchmen Podcast, Season 2. We are here talking all things dating, matchmaking, what it's like to date now in 2025, the things that we all go through. We have an amazing guest on today. His name is Will, a good friend of mine, a client of mine. He's kind of going to bring a perspective to us of, someone that's previously been married, has children, and now what it's kind of like to date in New York City, in the wild here. And it's an exciting time because I feel like Will has been on a journey, and I'm excited to have him here to kind of share his experiences and his do's and don'ts of dating. So thank you for coming on. Welcome to the Hitchman Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I think one thing that I really wanted to talk about this season and, bringing new people on and really hitting in on of dating intentionally and dating, not just to date casually and just to run around and meet people. And, I think as a business owner and, helping people through this process of dating, the first kind of thing I want to talk about is dating intentionally and also the idea of dating multiple people at the same time. So I've been really struggling with that with some of my clients that are sometimes wanting to line up date after date after date and looking ahead of the person that they're going on a date with the next day or on Wednesday or on Thursday, and they kind of want a lineup of people. So I kind of want your perspective on kind of how you date and kind of how you like to kind of, are you dating kind of one person at the same time? Or are you kind of, dating multiple people at the same time to kind of operate?
Well, I don't think you've ever offered me a lineup of like a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It's more like sporadic, one every couple weeks.
Yeah, well, because we got to be serious about it. That's why.
Um, I'm more in the camp of I date one person at a time. Like I get people confused. I just don't have the time or the energy to date multiple people, and maybe that's an age thing. Um, but I'm more focused and intentional on that one person to understand whether or not that is the right person for me. And I don't go with first impressions anymore. Although I know that, like in Blink, your impression is formed in the first 3 seconds. But I've just learned to allow the relationship to marinate over time, because maybe my first impressions were wrong, and I should give it some more time.
Yeah, I think, also one thing I just realized, I think the one thing I love about Will is also he's an entrepreneur and a businessman. He's so intelligent. But I think what also he's taught me is wisdom. And with age comes experience. Now in my early 30s, in a completely different part of my life, I look back in those early 20s and I was like, I didn't know anything. And I was so inexperienced. And I think that's something, that comes with experience. And I think that's, as someone, who has been in the city for a long time. You grew up in the Jersey or lived in the Jersey area and now have been living in the city for a while. I think that's something that you probably have learned through experience and dating. So I think that's something you're going to bring to our young guys kind of that are out there in these streets right now. And I think it's something that I'm sure females will tell you is that sometimes they feel like guys have a, longer clock and sometimes they're not as on it and they're not so, pressured to have, a marriage earlier or have children earlier because their time clock is a little bit longer. So I think that's another aspect that I would love for you to kind of talk about and kind of, this new journey of being single after, being married and kind of what that process is like for you dating now.
So I think that I, I s- what I say to people about dating when you're older and you've been divorced is it's great because you have all the wisdom from your post college years up to now. You have money in the bank, hopefully, and it just makes for a more enjoyable journey. So it's less frantic and it's more about enjoying the ride. So in term, you made a point about how with each passing year you may look at things differently.
Yeah.
I always say that you could look at that picture and you have an interpretation at 25, and then you look at the picture at 30, 35, 40, and with each passing year you haven't nothing's changed. The picture is exactly the same, but how you process things, how you view that picture is different.
Yeah.
And the same goes towards how you approach relationships. And how maybe in my 20s I didn't listen. um, I may have asked questions, but maybe I fell into the trap of doing more talking. Now I ask a lot of questions, and I always say you never have a bad conversation if you do all the talking. So not that I deflect attention from myself, but I'm a curious person and I like to get to know people.
Yeah, and I think questions allow for you to really, and when you actually listen, you actually get to know that person at a deeper level. And I think that's an interesting, thing with talking with clients or friends that I'm kind of helping through this process, is that they go on dates and sometimes they don't actually feel like they make a real connection because it's just surface level things, and you never really talk about anything that's real. It's vacations or favorite restaurants, and or not like emotional things that you're maybe going through. And I think sometimes in your early 30s, you're moving so quickly with your career, with your life, with the dating apps which offering you thousands of matches at all times. You feel like those dates sometimes just fly by. I think you're a person that I love because every time the feedback is always like, I had a great conversation with Will. He had a great personality. He has great questions and he listened. And that's very different than I think some of the guys that I'm working with in their early 30s, because I think they're moving at such a fast pace that they think, oh, I gotta, get here and I have to, shoot my shot, but also, show off a little bit and show these girls that I have this or I have that. I think that sometimes comes from insecurities of wanting to provide a life, which I think a lot of girls here in New York City, we talk about and we see, it's that the era of the Birkin bags and Dior and, the Balenciaga lifestyle that, so many people want. And they move so quickly, just, kind of writing people off if they don't see that, oh, this person's going to provide that life right away. Or if they're in their early 30s, I don't really want to wait 5 or 6 years for them to kind of make it in their career. And I think sometimes that scares guys, right? In their early 30s, when they're dealing with the pressure of not only performing at work for their boss, but then also dating in real time, and these girls expecting them to take them to the nicest restaurants and buy them dinner and buy them drinks, and then the next thing of buying them the bags and the clothes and the lifestyle and the trips. And I think sometimes, I talk about my company and bringing old school values into new way of dating. It's just be patient, And I talk to my girls a lot about like, just get to know the person for who they are, because all that stuff is amazing. But at the end of the day, if you don't actually enjoy the company of your person that you're spending time with, then that's not a real relationship, and it's not going to last the time that you really, like I always talk about my grandparents being married for 71 years. Their relationship was built off love, not the bags or the lifestyle or the money. And I think that's something that in New York City, I've been working on with my clients, both male and female. Male sometimes feeling the pressure of having to perform, and then the females wanting a man that's going to provide that without really getting to know someone. So I think you offer an interesting perspective because you were married, and you were married pretty early, I think, right? You were, how old?
30.
You were 30, which is nowadays, I feel like not many guys are married at 30.
But my counterpoint to your point is things are nice. And I definitely was of that mindset the first go around. But at the end of the day, you have to live with that person. And that's more difficult than living with nice things. And so on my second go around, um, especially after I got divorced, like I almost walked away from everything. I just didn't care. Like I didn't care about the things. And also being a parent, I've got 3 kids who are in the early 20s and late teens. But stuff is stuff. Stuff can be replaced, but people are what that can't be. Relationships, that's what can't be replaced. So at this stage in my life, I put a much greater premium on my relationships and getting to know people, and less about the material things.
Yeah, I think it's about the idea of finding someone, of course, that is hardworking and, ambitious and wants to work hard to have a family and provide a life for someone, but also the idea of getting to know someone just for who they are, right? And also, I think that idea of building together, which I think sometimes, again, and I talk a lot about this because I think what I've been dealing with as a matchmaker and a dating consulting, I think, is the women sometimes putting a lot of pressure on the guys, and then the guys getting a little nervous and then kind of pulling back, and then the guys feeling like I kind of just want to ghost, and I don't really want to be involved with that person anymore, and I don't want to explain to them why. And I think that it's caused a little bit of distance, right? And I think that's also the same idea of why on first dates sometimes people feel are like other people are closed off because they're scared to kind of show their true colors or things that maybe they're really going through on a daily basis of pressure. That I think less less and less I'm seeing guys with confidence and more the idea of feeling like, maybe I'm just going to wait to my later 30s, early 40s to start dating when I have everything together. What's your advice to those guys?
Well, there's an earlier point that came to mind, which is I'm a big believer in matching people, matching energy. So I try to be very attuned to the energy that's being put out there, and if I feel like, especially early on, if there's not much energy being directed towards me, then I match that, and I've tr- and this is like a life lesson, because I used to think I could will anyone to like me, and that's definitely not the case. And of course, that's somewhat arrogant of me to think that, but now I'm more tuned to what I'm receiving, and I just, if it's not a match, it's not a match,
Yeah.
and then you move on.
What's your advice, though, I think, to guys in their, 30s that are developing their careers and kind of going after not only their careers, but also looking for a serious relationship? What are some things that kind of help in that confidence side of things?
Know who the fuck you are. Take time, be comfortable alone with yourself, and know what you want for yourself, or have an understanding at least of what that might look like, um, and then live your life. And if you feel that someone either complements it or challenges you in a good way to live a more robust life, that's how I approach relationships,
I like
rather than
that
having
challenge.
it look a certain way.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing, the thing that I love with what you just said, and I'm going to take a point out of that, is being able to challenge your partner, challenge the person you're dating, whether it's straight, gay, everything in between. I think that idea of in a relationship, you should be constantly pushing each other to get better, to get stronger, to learn new things. And I think sometimes it's, I'm an old school values guy where my dad, always was the guy that wanted to provide and always wanted to, be that man that was there for us at all times, financially, emotionally. But my mom, who, has worked and has a career, but, didn't put as much energy into that. It was more about us and raising us and putting energy into us. I always saw how she motivated my dad and motivated him to be a better man and to work harder, and she didn't like put him down for not making as much money as this person or that person, but really tried to give him tools as a wife or as a partner to really push him forward. And I think that's something that I've been really talking a lot with my female clients about. You don't have to be the person that's providing the financial, money in the bank account, but if you want a man and you want to provide in a different way, it's the idea of, pushing your man to be better, or, lifting him up in areas that give him confidence, not put him down, and not also make him scared that, I'm never going to be able to provide for this person. I'm never going to be able to give this person that big house and the white picket fence and the house in the Hamptons and the lifestyle and the vacations and the trip to St. Bart's. And there's an idea of lifting them up rather than putting pressure on them that I think we've kind of lost a little bit.
So again, in the vein of volleying in the conversation, I think that you should both the male and the female should lift each other up. I look at a relationship as a relationship of equals, where I fully support and am attracted to successful women, because I like the banter of sort of being like a consigliere to help my partner think about how to approach a problem, or how to achieve personal best, or even understand what it is they want. Um, I have a good friend who is engaged to a very successful woman. They're both very successful. She has sold a company for several $100 million, and she's an angel investor. She is involved in several other businesses and charities, and she started a podcast as well. And I said, well, what is it what's your goal? What do you want? And she said, I want to win. And that was sort of a striking, she's very driven. Um, and I was kind of thinking, you've already won. Like, it looks like you have a really good life. Maybe slow down and just kind of recalibrate yourself and learn how to understand who you are now that you've sort of made it, and what want your relationship to look like.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting, and I can kind of chime in here a little bit as, a business owner. As I've been building my business now for 2 years, and it's like I've just over the holidays, I took a break from everything because I just needed to refuel myself, and I needed to also just take a moment to enjoy like my family and like the things that are most important in this world. I think that lifestyle that we live here in New York City and Florida and the Hamptons and traveling all over the world, sometimes it you get into this hamster wheel of running, 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 and the idea of really honing in on the most important things are your friends, your family, or your children, and spending quality time with them. I know you just did a trip with your daughter down to Florida, and I know you love to like kind of take those moments to spend one-on-one time with your children, which I think is so beautiful. And I think that's one of the things that I look up to you in a sense too, about like being a father, and you really take the time to spend with your children and to invest in them. And I think that's where I kind of want to then, kind of go back to the dating side of the world of here, dating in New York City, and kind of what your experience has been dating, in with women that, maybe already have children or are in their later 30s and maybe want children but haven't been married yet. And what the difficulties that you've kind of seen are, also just the way that you manage and you put your best foot forward with that.
I'm very clear that I don't want children again, younger children. So what I table is, how about a college graduate with earning potential? Three, actually. Um, so I don't. I find so if I know that a woman wants children and wants to have their own children, I'm very candid, as you know from a recent experience. Um, I don't want to lead them on, and I don't want them to lose any time dating me. Not that that would be lost time, but in terms of like their internal
Yeah.
clock, it could be perceived that way. So I do find that I prefer to date women who have children, because there's a certain commonality of experiences and just a mindset that you understand. Like, you people can say, I understand you've got children, I understand that, but until you have children, like, it's a constant mind fuck. It's 24/7, and the demands, like, as they get older and a greater command of the English language, they just get meaner.
Yeah.
So
More
like,
demanding.
yeah, so you just and so when you're dating a woman who has children, I mean, it's, in my mind, it's kind of like an opportunity to be a parent and a friend versus just a parent. And you're not married to the situation, in that you're not the parent, you don't try to be the parent, and you can also back off and walk away, but it's also a family unit that you get to participate in, and you get to bring the experiences and the mindsets that you have from raising your children to this new situation and experience.
Yeah, I think the blending of, two families is sometimes that's something that's scary. And like I kind of previously mentioned, I was in a role of, I was dating someone with children, and I've been in that position. And I think for me and what I saw in myself, and we kind of talked before, I'm a caretaker. I love to take care of things. I was raised with two amazing role models in my grandmother and my mother, that I think that's always kind of been a space of wanting to. I've always wanted to have children, and that's something that's on my next. That's like my next bucket list in 2025, is to kind of really push towards that energy. But I think that's something that when you're dating or when you're looking for someone in that process, do you look for those features of like, a motherly instinct and an energy behind, that, because also knowing that they're also going to be a part of your children's life?
I think it's more like an instinctive, like a sense they have similar values to me. That was what attracted me to my ex-wife. I mean, there were a lot of things. She's very different from me, and that made me a better person. But yeah, we had similar values that we were raised with, and neither of us ever lost those. So for the most part, we were on the same page about how we wanted to raise our children. And so I have found that the women I'm attracted to who have children, typically their mindset in terms of how they approach parenting, and also their values, are similar to mine.
Okay.
And they don't have to be exactly
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same, but we're generally aligned. And I always learn something from them as well in terms of how they approach something that makes me think about, wow, like I could do this differently. Or
Yeah, and I
this.
think also probably the idea of like how you can be a better father or how you can kind of approach different situations because you've kind of been through the same experience. I think that's something that I think it's such an interesting topic and interesting space of dating again after being divorced and having children. And I think it's a lot of people are scared to kind of have that next experience, and sometimes it sometimes I feel like they hold back a little bit, or they when they meet someone they sometimes write them off instantly because they're trying to protect themselves, or they haven't fully healed, which I think is a conversation I wanted to have for you. I was just watching something recently about how, it was a TV show. It was trashy TV, but I actually brought something from that. The idea of did you
Like
heal?
Jersey Shore trashy
No, it
TV?
wasn't. It was like Wags to Riches in Miami because they had football players on it, and it was. I actually don't love trashy TV, but this was like a funny, really moment that I just got hooked on it, and they were talking about Chad Ochocinco and his, to be fiance. Were talking about healing from your past relationships, your past marriages with children, to then bring that into a new relationship. There's a time frame, and you kind of mentioned this before we started the podcast. I want you to kind of talk about that, about dating people that have kind of healed before, from a divorce or from a previous relationship, and kind of what that means and what those experiences that you've had from that.
So I have a rule, which is if I typically won't date someone who is just out of a long-term relationship, because I believe like for that first year, and I learned from re-examining my own actions after my divorce that like it's like a pendulum, and you haven't found your equilibrium yet. And I did things and made decisions that were atypical or uncharacteristic of me. And then, I mean, the years after that, maybe some might say I drank too much, but I was having a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and wasn't necessarily looking for a serious relationship. Then COVID came along, and somehow we lost a couple years. And now I've landed at in 2025, I'm more intentional about my dating. Like I even write down my intentions for 2025 and make it my screensaver. And one of them is committed relationship. Um, so I have a clearer idea. I'm more grounded after several years that I want to be in a committed relationship and have a decent idea of what I want that to look like. Or at
Yeah.
least I hope I know what it is when it's in front of me.
I love that idea, and we've talked about this before, of like writing things down and really being intentional with them, because we sometimes we have all these thoughts in our head that just are flying around, and the idea of really writing them down, or I'm writing a book right now, and I think that's been a really therapeutic moment for me to be able to kind of get things out of my brain and put them on paper, and then to go revisit them again. And I think I've had a couple questions that I've had come in, and I think these are kind of good questions I kind of want to talk about and kind of bring up. And I think you kind of talked a little bit about the idea of what it feels like, and what are some tools and some things that people can, and guys specifically, can do to help with their confidence in their 30s, to kind of take that next step from dating to the idea of marriage. And I think you talked about the confidence that you need to have to know who you are, and what you stand for and your values. But what are some other things that you can kind of give to people as you were married at your 30s? What are some things that kind of helped you kind of put your feet on the ground and be like, I'm going to propose, I'm going to ask this person to be my wife and to have children at that early age of 30s, that can kind of help some of my guys feel confident in being really serious about dating and not just running around being a playboy?
I'm probably not going to give you the answer you want because, like, I had my head up my ass. I was living overseas. My ex-wife was living in New York, and basically she told me to shut her get off the pot. So we took a trip to Morocco. We got engaged there, and it just felt like that was the path that I was on to get married, have a family, and so I can't really offer more advice than that because
You got the ultimatum.
yeah, I got the ultimatum, and had she not said that, we'd probably still be dating, which might be in a
Uh,
better place. But I wasn't that intentional. And to my earlier point, I sort of had my head up my ass until I was 27 or 28. And the good thing about being in this position, divorced at the age that I'm at now, in my 50s, is that I've paid attention along the way. I've reflected on it, and I have a better understanding of who I am and what I want and what I bring to the relationship. And I just wasn't mature enough when I got married the first time and didn't even know how to think about this stuff. But raising a family is very educational and really set the course for me.
Makes you grow up real fast, which I think is like
Well, I
someone else
wouldn't
is
say, I'd say
responding
I
on
grew
you.
up more after I got divorced, because divorce in itself is, I respect people who get divorced versus live through a miserable marriage,
Yeah, I
because
agree with that.
they made a decision, and they made a really difficult decision. And if you have children, it's even harder.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I think having, you know, feeling and talking with clients that have grown up in a unhappy household, and then the things and the unhealthy kind of habits that they've then created from seeing, two parents that didn't get along, that, should have probably gotten divorced, is definitely something that we talk about a lot. So there is bravery, right? And, separating and then co-parenting and putting that in a healthy space. But I think being someone, I think maybe I can give a little advice to the guys. I think I've always been a person I think this comes from my sports background. I've always been very confident in who I am. And I think the idea of being able to communicate that on first, second dates, or just in my everyday life of being like, I want that idea of a family and the white picket fence. And I know it takes time, and I know that it's not going to come tomorrow, and I know that it's going to be a journey, but it's always the idea of being teammates. And I think the pressures that some of the guys feel here in New York, with, like we talked about before, about being able to financially provide for their partners, I think if you're able to communicate that early, and you're able to say, hey, like, I'm in my career and I'm really working hard to, get somewhere, and I'm looking for a teammate. I'm looking for someone that's also going to lift me up, that's going to work hard. Like you said before, you're attracted to hardworking females that, really are driven to kind of create their own thing, but also then to come together, like we talk about, as a team. That ability to communicate early on, hey, like, this is where I'm at. I'm 35, and I'm not exactly where, I'm not a partner yet. I'm not, at that space where I'm making $1 million a year. I'm making a couple 100,000, and I want more, but I'm still working towards those things. And if you're able to communicate those things, I think there's an idea right there. That's confidence. And that's also the ability for the female, or if it's a gay relationship, if it's another male, to be able to say, oh, hey, this person is being honest of where they are in life. And you can that person will either step up to the plate and say, I appreciate you being honest. I appreciate you kind of coming forth and, putting this idea, in front of me. And the right person will step through that door and say, hey, like, I want to be your teammate, or, hey, I got you, let's build something together. And the wrong people that are just out for the money, that are out just, to take, will walk the other way. And I think the idea of being open and honest, again, confident, and who you are and where you're at in life, is something that goes a long way. And I think also will help. I have a buddy that I've really, I've known since we were 17 years old, and we've gone through life together. And he's at a very interesting point in his life and in his relationship, that they're living bi-coastal, and he's feeling pressures from, all aspects of moving. He's been building his career here in New York. And I think, what he has is kindness and love, and he has a beautiful personality. And every time I introduce him to my friends, they're like, oh my God, I love this guy. I think what we've been talking a lot about is build yourself up, build your confidence up about your career, about your life in your early 30s. So then when it comes to be 35, you feel like, I got I got my feet on the ground, and I'm ready to take that next step with who I am, not what other people expect me to be. And it's something that I want my also, and this is kind of a shout out to my females out there. Life is all about teamwork. It's all about, friendship and love, and the success stories that come across my desk are people that are there to work together, to lift each other up, to be on the same team, not the people that expect everything to be handed to them, that expect, that, like we talk about, that Birkin bag, that Balenciaga, to just be handed to them. And I think as someone that, if I'm being fully transparent, I had in my early life things handed to me. There's such a beautiful part now in my 30s where I'm working to buy things, to buy those Louis Vuitton shoes, to buy that suitcase, to buy that sweatshirt. There's such an energy that comes from buying it for myself that's really beautiful. And I think when you're able to put that idea of, doing things for yourself and then contributing to a partnership, you'll start to see people in a different light. And you'll start to lift people up from a different side of a relationship and dating.
I also look for, if I'm on a date with a divorced woman, someone who has divorced amicably. I have a very amicable divorce, and what helped us with our divorce was our operating procedure was act in what's in the best interest of the children. And so we tried to do that. I look back on things now, and it all again depends on your mindset at that moment in time. But we have I'd like to believe we have a pretty healthy divorce. People in the town where we raised our kids say, if we're going to get a divorce, let's try to emulate their divorce. It's like the standard, some people say. So I look for women who are amicably divorced, because if it's bitter, then there's baggage there. And I'm looking for an easy relationship, in the sense, like, I've had a lot of drama. I've got some kids who hopefully they're not going to listen to this, who are drama filled. And so it's nice to just, I'm more looking, my ideal partner is more like steady, consistent, and calm.
Yeah, a teammate. I think it's something I think in the sports world I always talk about, and now in dating it's really reflected. Someone that it's going to be on your team, and the same idea too of restarting your dating journey. I think it's that idea of looking for someone that's also going to fill in those spaces that necessarily didn't have in that first go around. That, and it sounds like calmness and kindness and someone to be kind of that partner in crime here in New York City is exactly what you're looking for. And I'm excited to continue our journey working together and setting you up with, these fine, fun, fabulous New York City and women, from when we had a Florida date. Our business as it expands, we're kind of all over the place. So I'm excited to continue to set and put beautiful women in front of you. I thank you for coming on our podcast and kind of giving a perspective, for our men out there that have, been through it and dealing with, what goes in dating here in New York City. And we're on to season 2 of the Hitchmen Podcast. Thanks for joining us again, and keep putting in the questions to my DMs, to my Instagram, to my email, because I love, kind of bringing you guys involved in this season and kind of answering any questions you guys have for us. So have a good rest of your day.